God alone, God alone's all we ever need. Let nothing disturb you, nothing affright you, all things will pass, but God changes not. Patient endurance brings you to victory. Once you have God, you'll want nothing more. God alone, God alone, God alone, God alone, God alone, God alone's all we ever need. Hello friends, Naya Swami Hriman here from the Kameno Hermitage on Kameno Island. We continue after the snowstorm of the other day. I'm getting messages of internet issues, so I don't know how this broadcast will come out. But I'm going to read anyway and hope for the best. This poem by Paramhansa Yogananda was published in April of 1941. It's out of print now, so far as I know, and it's called In Grief's Garb. In grief's garb, come thou, O God, to me, like sorrow stepping stealthily. Enter, O darling and soul of mine, on altar amaranthine. In thickets of joyous tears, if I should lose thee ever dear, with touch of tears wipe thou my heart, and pluck its bleeding delusions dart. By magic touch of thy grief hand, I'll fly in ecstasy's eternal land. The echo of my pain ever beat, the approach of thy holy feet. If thou dost deem it right, wash me in waters of sorrow, bathing me with tears of pain. Embrace me with your affection's chain. Well, I would be hard-pressed to analyze that poem for you, but I think you get the general gist. And it's a truism in life and in the wisdom gained through the experience of life for those who gain wisdom at all. And it's certainly a truism also on the spiritual path, both, that it is through our challenges, our suffering, that we learn the most, that we have the opportunity to gain the most. Not saying that most people do. Probably most people, I suppose, don't. In other words, they carry the fear, the pain, the resentment, the sorrow, the grief, etc., with trials and tribulations that they receive. But a sensitive reading of the history of great men and women and of great saints will show that through the vicissitudes of life, we really learn the most. I remember one Swami Kriyananda who had a very difficult life at certain stages of humiliation and reproach and condemnation and general indifference and rebellion, betrayal, and ill health enough to, boy, you should have seen his medical chart. When a doctor would look at it, I could not believe all the various things he was challenged by, medically speaking. And yet when someone made a comment that he had a difficult life, he paused and said, gee, I don't think I've had a difficult life. And of course he had, but he had the strength and the willpower and the faith to accept all that came as for his own greater wisdom and benefit. It's really difficult. In fact, it's so difficult to realize that in the midst of our troubles that I almost would like to say don't bother. Make the effort, of course, but when you're in hellish pain, whether emotional or physical, you can't help but cry out to some degree. And that cry can be for relief, for mercy. It can be for out of anger even, and putting your fist up and so forth. But so long as there is somewhere in you the desire to understand, the willingness to deal with your troubles, the faith to know that there must be some goodness behind the mailed glove of fate that is attacking you seemingly. I think that's what is not the time particularly to be contemplative. And so it's after the fact, and the habit of reviewing the day's activities before we go to bed at night. Many of us meditate before bed, but even if you don't meditate at that particular time, to contemplate the victories and failures, I guess, of the day in terms of the victory of keeping God conscious, the victory of being kind, etc., wise, making good decisions, etc., versus the failure to do so. Still, the spiritual path is the process of one word: memory. And isn't memory one of the biggest issues that faces humanity today? Smriti in Sanskrit. In Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, he says the spiritual path is a process of awakening, remembering who we are, remembering the greater reality that goes beyond the moment at hand. It's all about improving our memory, or as Yogananda said in his definition of self-realization, of improving our knowing, our gnosis. And that recollectedness is called mindfulness in certain quarters, and that word works perfectly fine, understood in a deeper way than just watching your thoughts and being identified with them, which isn't a bad thing to do either. But this mindfulness, this mind that's full of awareness, is really the secret to happiness, the secret to wisdom. In fact, Patanjali defines the whole process as not being reactive in the moment. And so whereas in the moment of circumstances that come to us, it's difficult not to experience the pain or the joy or the pleasure, whatever it might be, but the degree to which we, like a water heater, I remember this coming to me years ago when I moved to the Seattle area and took part in the management of our Ananda community there, and which takes the form of apartments, and they all have water heaters. And I remember being educated in how water heaters work, and the speed with which a water heater recovers its desired heat within itself from the influx of cold water as it's being used is a good measure of the water heater's efficiency. And the degree to which we recover from the forgetfulness that is implicit when we indulge in our reactions, our emotions, our momentary feelings of high and low, the degree and the speed and the efficiency with which we recover our equanimity is the great measure of our spiritual growth. Now, that's not to be confused with indifference. That's a deadly because it deadens the soul. It deadens the feelings. That we need the feelings. We just need them on a deeper, more consistent basis, like an underground river of life that flows within us and behind our ever-changing thoughts and emotions. And so recollectedness is the important thing, because the grief's garb, as this poem, the sorrows of life and the pleasures and successes of life too, but all of these things are warp and woof. No one, as Buddha said, is free from death, disease, or old age. And the secret to overcoming these is not to be done on a material level by living immortally and forever healthy and young, forever young. That's not going to happen, is it? No, it's being inured to the grief, the despair, the fear, the resentment and the anger, etc., associated with these three inevitabilities. A fourth inevitability is, of course, the sorrow and the disappointment that comes in day-to-day life in so many ways. And so sometimes we can't help our stupidity. Sometimes we can't help the things that get us into trouble, the things that we do. But to the degree we can, like that water heater, recover our memory of our royal nature, of our equanimous nature, then even though we must bear the consequences of our actions, nonetheless we will recover in that equanimity our inner peace. So let the grief games progress, let the joy games continue, let the pleasure moments come and go as they must. And as we age and as disease assails us and finally death summons us elsewhere, let us always be mindful of the truth that shall make us free. I am He, Tatvamasi. Okay, great souls, enjoy the day. We're covered in snow up here on Camino Island. I hope to be able to make a successful trip out of here, back to the Ananda community in Seattle. Brave the ice and cold out there, but I suspect I will.